If you clicked on this video, I'm guessing you already know you need to maintain your RV, but you're looking for help to learn how to do it yourself to save from costly repairs. In this video, I'll walk you through our maintenance checklist for living full-time in our RV and show you how to perform each task. Hi, I'm Steve from Radar RotoWires. My wife and I live in our 2020 open range 371 MBH fifth wheel, and I'm going to show you how we perform our weekly, monthly, quarterly, and annual maintenance items in our RV. And since there's a lot of items to maintain in our RV, this will be a longer video. You can skip around in this video to the areas you need help with by using the chapters in the description below. I'm going to show you the highlights performing each task so you have a general idea of what needs to be done, but I'm not going to go into full details or this video would be hours long. The description of this video has a wealth of knowledge in it. Make sure you go down there and download a free copy of our Excel RV maintenance checklist. Once you download it, you can save it to your computer and add items that are specific to your RV. You'll also find the links to all the products we use to maintain our RV. To make this easy, we'll put all the items sold on Amazon in the RV maintenance and repair list. You can print off a checklist to follow along during the video. The first thing on that list is weekly items. This is being observant of your RV. When you're walking around doing things like dumping your tanks, grilling outside, just walking into the RV, whatever you're doing, just keep an eye on things, looking for seams and seals, things that could be gaps in them, water leaking, wheels could possibly be bent or crooked, or axles having issues. You can find those things and fix them before you leave for your next trip. And now we're on to the monthly items. These are things that get used daily or need to be checked often to ensure they keep working properly. And first off is defrosting the RV style freezer. This sounds like a big job, but it's fairly easy as long as we plan out doing it before we load a freezer full of groceries. A big tip in making this easier is the thin plastic sheets we put on the back wall and on the bottom, so ice builds up on these and it's much easier to remove. The areas that are thicker, we use a hair dryer to warm up the ice so it can be peeled off, but you don't want to use too much heat in the cold plate at the back of the freezer. Next is checking the smoke detectors and fire extinguishers. RVs normally come with one of those just in the kitchen area. We've replaced the one in the kitchen, added one in the bedroom, and a few more outside. So I got 4 of these around the RV to check, and we also added 3 fire extinguishers. When you're checking these, you'll push the button, make sure you hear the alarm that comes on, and move on to the next one. And when you're looking at the fire extinguishers, you're checking the gauge. The little needle should be in the green so you know it's charged. It's also good practice once in a while to take them off, flip them over, shake them. You can smack the bottom to make sure none of the powder gets stuck in the bottom. So you need to use it, it comes out the top. Now we're checking the windows and screens. You want to make sure nothing is broken and everything functions properly. So looking at the screens, you want to make sure none of the screens are falling out so things will keep the bugs out and your cats in if that's the case. If you have the slider windows, make sure they go up and down and they latch where they should. If you have the frameless windows, these will stick if they sit for a long period of time. So make sure they open up and they work when you need to use them. We're checking all of our dehumidifiers. We have a large plug-in style one. This works way better than the little RV ones we used to have. On the bottom of this, there's a little bucket that collects the water. So monthly, we'll take this, rinse it out, bleach it, make sure it doesn't create mold and have issues inside of it. We also have these little rechargeable dehumidifiers. These go in the cabinets, under the bed, and the wardrobe. Places don't get a lot of airflow. They suck the moisture into them, and monthly we recharge them. So to recharge them, they're pretty simple. There's a little tab that pops out in the back. We plug this in. This one takes 10 to 12 hours, and it's ready to go for another month. And now we're looking for mold, because nobody wants that, especially inside their RV. So we're going to check underneath the mattress, going to pick it up, use a flashlight, look for any black spots. The same thing in the back of our cupboards, our wardrobe areas, our little closets, looking for any black spots or mold or moisture. Now we're cleaning our air conditioner filters. There's little foam screens in here to collect the dust, the dirt, and debris. So we pop these out with a knife. It's pretty simple. When you get these out, you clean them with some soap and water, let them air dry, put them back in place. Our ones in our bedroom are a little bit different style, but they both clean the same way. We did try replacing these one time with the allergy filters. They were much thicker and they blocked much more of the dust and the dirt, but air did not flow and the RV didn't cool off. So we went back to the original foam filters. We just clean them every month. If you have a Splendide combo washer and dryer like us, you'll want to run a vinegar rinse once a month to keep a lint from building up. We'll link our how-to video for cleaning this machine below. We're checking our water lines and drains for leaks and tightness. This is underneath of the sinks, underneath the shower if you can get to it, and behind the wet bay where all the hoses and connectors are. They're really important to do this when you first get the RV, and then monthly to make sure things don't loosen up, especially after you travel. You reach your hand in there, you'll check your lines, make sure nothing is loose, just hand tighten all these, go around, look for any leaks or stains, do in every area where there's water connections so you don't have any issues going forward. If you have lead acid batteries, you need to check the water level and top it off if you need to. I don't have the exact steps on this because I have maintenance-free battery-borne lithium batteries in the RV. You want to make sure you look up the steps, how to perform the maintenance on your batteries. But either way, make sure you wear gloves. You don't want acid touching your skin. With our washer and dryer, there's a vent to the outside. We've noticed lint balls coming out of the dryer vent before. So it's a pretty quick job to do. I crawl in the basement, unconnect the pipe, take a little Dyson cordless vacuum, suck it out, put it back in place, and it's good to go. You need to check your outside vents and make sure nature didn't move in. This is looking for birds' nests, spider nests, bugs, wasps, etc. Especially in these areas that need airflow like the fridge area. Also, if you have a fifth wheel, make sure you check the pin box for any birds' nests in there, and walk around, look at your furnace and your water heater vents as well. Now we're looking at the fridge vents, we'll pop the cover off on the outside. When you pull the cover off and look on the inside, if things look good, I'll still take a damp rag and wipe the bottom down. I can take a vacuum and vacuum out some of the vents, or I can take my little air blower and blow some of the dust out of it. That way things are flowing properly. On our water heater and furnace, I put the screens on the outside. These do a really good job keeping the bugs out of them, but they are a pain to put on and it can void your warranty, so you want to check on that before you do install those. So with these on, I can use a furnace and a water heater, but they can restrict the airflow if things get built up on them, so it's really important to make sure these are clear so it airflows properly. Now we're checking a towing package for any cracks or loose bolts. This includes on the trailer and the truck both. Looking around for any paint that's cracked, any rust that's showing. Things like that indicate things are moving and you have a problem. Also, while you're up by your hitch, you want to check your electrical connection. This is a round 7-way plug that goes from the trailer to the truck. If you get a message on your dash that keeps on saying trailer disconnected, that's probably because you have a loose connection that's dry or corroded on the inside. Some dielectric grease inside of this plug really helps keep the water out. It makes a great connection every time. You just put some grease on the plug and put it back in the truck and you're good to go. If you have a generator, it needs to be exercised monthly. Whether it's a built-in one or a portable one, you need to run it for 2 hours and put a load on it. Sometimes this can be hard if we're in a campground because they don't allow us running a generator, but we do it when we can. So for exercising this, you need to start it up, let it warm up, and then actually put a load on it. Just like you're out boondocking, where you're running a generator to power things on the inside, like a fridge or an air conditioner. Let it run for a while. When you're done with the 2 hours, you can shut it off and make sure you check the oil when you're done. Now we're checking our propane tanks. We're looking around these for any rust or corrosion, signs you could have a possible leak. If everything is painted and looks nice, you're in good shape. And then look at the date code. The date code is a month and a year the tank was made. These are good for 12 years in the US and 10 years in Canada for tanks 100 pounds and smaller. You can get it recertified after that to last a little bit longer, which in the US gets you another 7 years and in Canada 5 more years. One of the very important items is checking and caulking the seams of the RV to keep the water out. So we're walking around looking for things that look out of the ordinary. If there's a gap in the caulking, or like this right here, there's some dirt behind there. We know it's not sealed up. We need to peel this off, put some new stuff on. So this is walking around the outside of the RV and then going up on the roof and checking the seams and seals up there also. I know it can be hard to get on the roof for some people, but it needs to be done. You can have an RV dealer do it, or a mobile tech, or if you have a grandson or nephew or someone that can get on the roof and take care of it for you. So for the sealants are used on the RV. On the walls or parts of the roof that are not touching the roof membrane is a polyurethane sealant. Do not use silicone sealant on the outside of the RV. That's only for the bathrooms on the inside. If you use silicone on the outside, it looks like it sticks at first, but eventually it'll peel off on the backside where it's not actually sealing and water's getting behind into the RV. That's very bad. Now on the roof, it's touching the membrane, we use Dicor. There's 2 different types of Dicor. There's self-leveling and non-self-leveling. Self-leveling is great for flat areas. After you put it on, it sits. Eventually it levels out by itself and looks nice and pretty. The non-self-leveling is great for the corners where you don't want the sealant running down the side of the RV. After you put it on, it stays right where you put it the first time. And now we're onto the sides of the RV. And sorry about the sun, it's behind the clouds is great. When it comes out, it's blasting me in the face. I gotta put some sunglasses on. With the RV, it has cable slides. Cable slides make the slides go in and out. You know, make sure you inspect these, look for any frays on the outside of the cable. The last thing you want is to have a broken cable when you're on a camping trip. Also, use some dry lubricant in these cables that cleans them and lubricates them so they stay in better working condition. And there's a good possibility you have a different type of slide mechanism, so check your manual to see how you need to maintain that mechanism. But every slide has seals on them to keep the water and the bugs out. They'll be on the top of the slides and the sides of the slides. So they make a special conditioner for these seals. You spray it on them, you wipe it off, keeps the seals pliable so nice and flexible to seal well. They don't squeak as you move the slides in and out, and it keeps the dirt and the dust off of them. The suspension in the RV by the wheels has moving parts and pieces. And most RVs have wet bolts on them. Wet bolts have a little greaser on the end. You use a grease gun, you put grease into them, keep them lubricated and moving properly. The grease I use on those, the same I use on wheel bearings, which is a red tacky number 2. And a tip, if you can't get the grease gun on the end of the fittings because they're straight and hit the tire, you can change the fitting on the end to a 45 or a 90. That way it's nice and easy to put the grease gun on the fittings. If you're getting value out of this video, please give it a like so other people can find it as well. And now we're on the quarterly part of the checklist. These are some of the harder maintenance items that many RV owners neglect, things that are out of sight or easy to keep out of mind. I did take the NRVTA RV training to learn about how RV systems are different than ones in a house, and I'll pass along tips from my level 1 certification as I go through the rest of the maintenance with you. Now we'll go back inside for the next part of the checklist. So we're going to go around and vacuum and wipe all the dust off our CO2 and smoke detectors. And do not use cleaners on these. The cleaners will affect the sensor in it and they won't work properly after that. And if you didn't know, the CO2 and the propane detectors that come in RVs have a 5-year expiration date. So you want to pop the back off once in a while, look at the date to see when yours needs to be replaced. So looking at the washing machine, I know we checked all the water fittings around the RV, but these are harder to get to, so I keep us on the quarterly list. This is checking the water fittings and the drain to make sure everything is tight and in place, and looking underneath the washer for any signs of leaks. Now we're checking our electrical connections. This is inside the RV and outside by the batteries. Inside by your circuit breaker panel. These are your circuit breakers that control your plugs on the inside, like the fridges, microwaves, things like that. So make sure you turn this power off first, pull the panel off, look for any signs of wires that are loose. You can wiggle some wires. And then your power's off, you'll be able to take and tighten all those connections, make sure everything is secure. Do the same thing on the outside of the RV, where any connections come through, any transfer switches, and again by your batteries, the wires going between the batteries and going out from the batteries to the RV. My batteries are in the basement, so I have to crawl in there to do those. Most batteries are easier to get to in the front bay or outside on the hitch. We'll go around to all of our locks and hinges and lubricate them to make sure they work properly. Make sure you use a dry lube for this. I use WD-40 dry lube. If you use a regular lube that's not dry, it will attract dirt and dust, then it plugs up those locks and hinges and makes them work worse. And a tip is to cut the end of the straw, that way it fits inside the keyhole, otherwise it's not quite small enough and makes a mess. Now this one's pretty easy. Going around and checking the cabinet doors and things are in place in the RV, then the screws are loose. If everything seems pretty good, you don't need to check every screw. One thing I did find doing this one time, the shelf over top the fireplace was only stapled in from the bottom and it was starting to fall out. I caught that, was able to fix it before all the things fell out of the shelf when we traveled down the road. For this, you'll need a flashlight and a multi-bit screwdriver. Most things are Phillips or a square head. I love this little screwdriver. I can change the end from flathead to Phillips to square. Just push them in, we're ready for the next one. Now we're into sanitizing a water system on the RV. This is your freshwater holding tank and all the water lines. I do this to kill all the bacteria in the system. I know some people are afraid to drink the water out of the fresh holding tank, but if you sanitize it, there's no bacteria in there, it's perfectly fine. And I use bleach for sanitizing it. If you're not comfortable with that, there's other methods you can look up to see how to sanitize your system. So we're going to go through the bleach method. For this, it's 2.5 ounces for every 20 gallons of water in your freshwater holding tank. Our freshwater holding tank holds 70 gallons of fresh water. Even though the RV says 80 gallons of fresh water, 10 gallons of that calculation is in a water heater. So 2.5 ounces per 20 gallons, that's just shy of 9 ounces of bleach in the whole system. For that, I'll put the bleach into a 5-gallon bucket, fill a 5-gallon bucket the rest of the way with water. And this RV has a winterization valve built into it, so I can hook up a hose on the outside, suck that bleach mixture into the RV, and goes right into the freshwater holding tank. Once I have that bleach into the holding tank, I can fill the fresh water the rest of the way with clean water. Now the freshwater tank is full. After that point, I'll run the water through the system. You need to start with the faucet that has the longest water line in it. For us, that's all the way back in the kitchen area. I'll turn the cold water on first until I can smell bleach coming out of it, and then the hot water line. And I'll do the same thing for every faucet inside the RV. Now here's a big question a lot of people have. Can you run bleach in your hot water tank? Well, it depends on your hot water tank itself. Ours is an Atwood hot water heater, which has an aluminum tank. You can run bleach inside that aluminum tank. If you have a steel tank, you cannot run bleach inside of it because it can cause some corrosion and issues inside of that tank. And how do you know what kind of tank you have? Depends if your tank has an anode rod. Our aluminum tank does not have an anode rod, only has a plastic plug at the bottom to drain the tank. On steel tanks, they have an anode rod that helps for the corrosion inside of that tank. So if you pull your plug out of your water heater and there's a long rod on the bottom of it, you have a steel tank. If you don't have a rod on the bottom of it, you have an aluminum tank and you're safe to run bleach through that hot water heater. Before you put bleach into that water heater, make sure it's turned off and the water is cool so you're not mixing hot water with a bleach mixture. Now once the bleach is in the whole system, you need to sit for a minimum of 8 hours, ideally 12 hours. For us, I let it sit overnight. The next day, I'll dump the freshwater tank, fill it a couple more times until there's clean water in the freshwater tank, And then I run the pump to pump the fresh water through the system to clean everything out until I can't smell any more bleach coming out of any of the faucets. And our next step in our list falls right in place after sanitizing the water system. This is flushing out the water heater. Before you do this, make sure the water heater is turned off. You never want to have the water heater element on when there's no water in the tank. That'll burn the element out. So we're going to drain the water out of it. Make sure it's cool because you can burn yourself with this. Let all the water drain out. Then we use a little wand. We flush the tank out. We shove it up inside there, back and forth. You'll see little white pieces coming out. That's a calcium buildup inside of the tank. That's what we're trying to get out. So once you clean that out of there, and a little bit of residue is coming out at the end, you pretty much have everything out. You flush it a couple more times. You should be clear water coming back out of the tank after you're flushing it out. And during this process is a good time to check your anode rod if you have one. If you pull it out, everything looks intact, you're good to go. If you see it start getting smaller, you know you should get one and change it next time you flush the water heater. If you have a water softener for the RV, like those little portable guys, you have to back flush those every 3 months. It's pretty simple to do them. Each one's a little bit different, so you follow the instructions for it. If you don't have one, move on to the next step. And now we're taking care of our awning. This is pretty simple to do. When you have the awning out, take a step ladder, look up inside the arm. You're looking for things that are built up in there, like the pine needles, branches, leaves. Those things can bind the awning up when it's trying to move, make it work harder. Also look for some bees nests up there. I know ours especially, they like to accumulate in one arm, build little nests in there. I gotta spray them out in the middle of the summer. And also, just like lubricating the locks and the hinges, take some of that dry lube, spray it in those joints that move, keep your awning moving nice and easy. That way it doesn't have to work harder and it lasts longer. I'm back down with the wheels again, and I just thought of something. Our list is ever evolving. As I learn new things, I'll add them to the list, but I can't update the video. So if you want a fresh copy, the list is always down below. Now as we're looking at the wheels, we're checking our brake linings, our brake drums, our wheel seals, looking for grease leaking and cracks in the wheels or issues with the tires. And what I do to make that easy is I have a little scope camera. This scope camera uses the Wi-Fi, connects to my phone, and the end of it's a little camera with a flashlight on it. On the back of the wheel, there's little holes to look inside of there. I can see the wheel seal, see if any grease is leaking, see if there's any issues with the brakes. I can look around the little holes and make sure the lining is thick enough, so that part is good to go. And for the rest of it, you can see it from the outside. So looking from the front of this, we'll be able to check out the rim, the wheel, and the brake drum. Take a flashlight, look inside the brake drum, look for any cracks inside of there. You can use that flashlight to see issues easier on the tires, looking for any cracks in the tires, any rips, any possible little holes, things that can cause you a blowout driving down the road. And take a nice good look at the aluminum rim. You can get little fine hairline cracks inside of that are a big problem and will need to change out as soon as possible before you travel. This is checking our emergency gear. Things like jumper cables or a boost pack if we have a dead battery, emergency triangles, road flares, things to get us off the side of the road if there's an emergency. We're going to go through all the things, make sure they still work, batteries are charged, they're in the right places and ready to use them when we need them. And a big tip, put a safety vest in the door pocket. That way you get out of the vehicle on the side of the road, you can quickly put it on because you know you're going to be in a hurry, but you don't have to worry about people not seeing you and having an accident on the side of the road. Now we're on to the yearly part. This section is more involved, just like the quarterly part of the list, but these things don't even done quite as often. Also, some of these might be similar to things that are earlier on the list, but we're taking it a step further. To start off with, we're going to vacuum our vents on the outside. This is our furnace vents, our water heater, and our fridge. You look inside of those, see where any dirt and particles are. You don't have to take them completely apart. You might have to take a few screws out, that way you can get behind it to actually clean the dirt and debris out of them. We're back around to some tight spaces again. I know earlier we checked to make sure everything was tight, but now we're cleaning out the traps and the sink drains. This is pretty simple. The P-trap in the bottom has 2 nuts on it, but you put a bucket underneath because the water's going to come out of that. When you pull that down, you'll see all the sludge and the slime in there. We'll rinse it out, put it into the bucket, take a paper towel, shove it through that trap a couple times until everything comes out clean. And then also, the little tube that goes up to the sink drain, sometimes you look down in those, you see some crud building up inside of that drain where the water's at. Do the same thing, take a paper towel, shove it up inside of there a couple times and twist it around until everything comes out clean, and put it back together, run some water through it, check for leaks, and your trap is back working again. And we're back to our windows and screens. I like to clean the screens at least once a year and wash the windows sometimes more often than that. This is taking all the screens out, rinsing them with a hose, take a light brush, a little bit of soap I use for washing the RV, and clean them out, let them air dry, and put them back in place. One of my favorite upgrades was getting rid of the original door lock and putting a keyless one on. I don't have to carry a key every time. I can push a button, get into the RV, lock it the same way. Makes life so much simpler than carrying keys around. But with that, there's batteries on this, so I change them out once a year. That way the batteries don't die when I'm outside of it and it can't get inside the RV. It's pretty simple to do, a couple screws in the back, change the batteries, but you do have to reprogram the code every time you change the batteries. Now we're servicing the ACs on the roof. It's always best to do this before the hot part of summer, that way your air conditioner is going to work at their best to keep the inside of the RV cool. The first step of this is make sure the power is turned off of the air conditioner. I flip the breaker on the inside of the RV, then pull the hood off on the top, and there's two coils to clean. One of them you can see in the outside, and the one in the front is for your inside air. You got to pull a little half hood off the top of that to expose that coil. So we use a little bit of foam inside of these. I like to use Dometic foam. I find this off Amazon. This foam I can use in inside or outside coils because there's no VOCs inside of this foam. If you have a foam that has VOCs in it, don't use that in the inside coil, but it's still fine in an outside coil. So I spray the foam on there, let it sit a little bit. It'll break down all that dirt and grime. Do not use a hose to spray it down, but I do use a little bit of a spray bottle, even though it's called a waterless foam. This really helps to rinse down all the dirt and grime. I'll put a rag at the bottom to soak everything up. Once everything is clean, I'll take the rags out, put the cover back on. But I will, when I'm inside there, inspect the fins. I use these little combs inside of there. These can straighten out the fins. Don't use a screwdriver, things like that, because you can poke the coil, and you can have bigger problems. You have to let all the gases out. You find one that fits into your coils, you can straighten out the fins, that way the air flows through them a little bit better than having a fin that's bent over and blocking off the airflow. While you're up on the roof, your holding tanks will have vents that come out the roof. These vents need to be inspected at least once a year to make sure no cobwebs or spiders, things like that, create a nest inside of that, blocking the airflow. If that happens, your tanks won't flow properly. So on the top of those, there's some silicone covering the top of the screw. You gotta peel that silicone out, pull the screw out, the cap pops right off, look inside of the flashlight. If everything's good, put the cap back on, put the screw in, then put some die-core silicone back on top of that screw to seal it off. Maintaining your RV's brakes and inspecting the wheel bearings go hand in hand. This is different than the earlier step of inspecting them because we're actually taking the wheel and the hub off and disassembling them to look at everything. I have a video on greasing bearings and changing a wheel seal that I'll link in the description down below. One thing the video doesn't cover is actually inspecting the bearings. I didn't have to do that during that video. So you take the hub apart and pull the seal out, you'll take the bearings out, clean them off, and look at them. You're looking for any pits, anything that doesn't look like a normal shiny piece of metal when you're rolling that bearing around in your hand. If everything looks good, you'll pack grease back in that bearing, put it back in place, put a new seal in, and put it back on the hub. But while you're doing all of that, you're going to inspect the brakes and actual mechanisms on the inside. When I was changing wheel seals and inspecting my brakes, I found I had a bad bushing inside of my brakes. The bushing is on the arm that made the brakes actually work. The bushing was cracked in half and worn out, so I changed a whole assembly on it, which is easier than trying to find an actual bushing that I couldn't find available at that time. Now this service for the wheels needs to be done at least once a year or every 12,000 miles, whichever one comes first. When I take the wheels apart, inspecting the bearings, I'm always looking at the brakes. And I found that the seals that come installed in the RV from factory, they're a little lesser quality than the national seals that I put in the RV. The factory seals only have 3 sides to them. It doesn't hold the seal really true and they leak really easy. And the national seals have 4 sides to it that hold that seal in place really well. Also on the outside of the national seals, there's a little red coating that seals it up when you put it in place. And we're changing our generator oil once a year or every 100 hours you run the generator. Our generator is an Onan 5500 watt gas generator. It takes 2 quarts of oil in it. I use 10W40. This is a motorcycle 4-stroke oil that works good for the generator. If you look in the manual, there's some other grades you can use in it, depending on your temperature and what you're doing with the generator. And the oil filter, I pick this up off of Amazon. It's much easier than trying to find that local stores. But if you always wonder what the part numbers are for your generator, right in front of it, it lists your air filter number, oil filter number, and the amount of oil it takes. And don't forget about washing the RV. I try to do this more often if I have soap and water available, but at least once a year I'm using the power washer, cleaning everything off, including the roof. Now some people freak out when I say power washer or washing the RV. You gotta be careful using a power washer. If you use too much pressure by your seams and seals, you can take stickers off or ruin your seals. When I'm using the power washer, I'll back the pressure down a little bit and by those seams and seals. If I need more pressure, I can use it if I have things that are stuck on like bugs, grease, or grime. And if I can't use water when we're out RVing, I'll use a waterless wash and wax system by Aero Cosmetics. I can clean the whole outside of the RV, sometimes the roof if I need to, but I usually just do the sides with that. And to keep a nice good shine, I use a ceramic Waxall. It keeps a real nice slick shine in it. It really helps get the bugs off the RV when I wash it. And if you want more information on using Aero Cosmetics products, I did a full video using their waterless wash and wax system and their ceramic wax, and both videos linked in the description down below. Now that all the maintenance is done, I have a few tips for you. If you got a printed owner's manual with your RV, look through that. They will list maintenance items that need to be done and how often to do them. If you didn't get an actual printed book, go online to your manufacturer's website. You should be able to find one. You can download it, save it in your computer, or print an actual hard copy. Now once you go through those maintenance items and you see what needs to be done, add those to that maintenance checklist as a description down below. And speaking of that list, that's the exact same one that we use to maintain our RV. We have it laminated, so when things are complete, I can go down through and put a dot on them to check them off. And it's right in our kitchen, so I see it every day. I can know if I need to do things or things are already done, and we don't forget about it because it's not tucked away in a drawer where it's out of sight and out of mind. If you want to get more value out of your RV whenever you sell it or trade it in, is keep track of all of your maintenance. I keep track of my maintenance on an Excel spreadsheet, and there's a folder on my computer where I keep my receipts and a picture of things I fixed on the RV. But I recently discovered that RV Life has a great feature to keep track of your maintenance, and I'll be switching over to that soon. If you want more info, I'll put a link down below. Like I said earlier, I couldn't record myself doing step-by-step of every task, or this video would be hours long. Now that you know what tasks need to be done, you can look up YouTube videos on how to do those. That way you can find instructions so you can do them yourself. We filled the description of this video with lots of valuable links to help you find the products and resources we talked about in this video. You can also find other helpful videos in our RV tips, installations, and repairs playlist that's up on the screen now. Comment down below if you have any questions, and we'll see you in the next video.